go.
Okay, put it.
Sorry, you. Hold your hand up.
Daniel, come on.
Hello, welcome to Heavy Storytelling.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rebecca. Happy birthday to you. Oh, Elsie's on.
Yay!
Oh, can we sing it again?
Let's sing it again. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rebecca. Happy birthday to you.
Look, I'm blowing up
Everybody, hey, if everybody decides to do harmony, then it's not harmony.
I've been doing it the entire time, though. I always do it that way.
Oh, that was
Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Mommy. I thought you would be Becca. Hello, welcome to Heavy Storytelling. Today is my sister Becca's birthday. If you didn't know, because we sang. We sang
her.
Yay! And it was only Mom. I'm happy she's here. I'm happy Mommy's here. But I hope you guys are having a good day. Hi, Mom. I know. Thanks for saying hi, Mommy. So today we are going to be reading the Bible with my daddy here. Then we're going to be doing synopsis. Then we're going to be reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with Heavy D.
And I'm Heavy D. Hi.
Storytelling.
Hi, how's everybody doing today? I've got 2 notifications, reacted, and I'm live. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we're going to read. Oh, Easton is looking for Mom right now. Okay, here is the. Hey, can you prop that door open so that Easton doesn't accidentally get locked in there? Okay, so here is the link if you want to follow along. And we're going to start, here we are, Genesis 48. This one's a short one. We're going to read 49 and 50 together tomorrow. And then we will be done with Genesis, and we'll have to decide which book to go to next. And I have a sneaky suspicion that I know which one it'll be. I will reveal that tomorrow. All right, so this is Genesis 48 in the English Standard Version of the Bible. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and it was told to Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. As for me, when I came to Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." Then Joseph removed them from his knee, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near to him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "But you, Israel, will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow." And that is the end of chapter 48. So I hope you're enjoying that. Rebecca says, "Hey guys," she says, "thank you for the happy birthday wishes." Here's JJ who wants to say happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Becca. How are you doing?
And it's going to be time for the synopsis very soon. Hey.
Kim's also going to send the links.
I don't think we need to send the links if Rebecca's already on.
Yeah.
What about Jessica? I don't know if they're going to be on.
Here's Kim.
Besides, if mom's on, then they probably. So what happened in the last few chapters was, you see, they found a few whales, and they were like a different species, and they found out why. They found out part of the reason why they were going south. They were actually going to. Mom says PJs. JJ. So the reason they were going south was they were going to go underneath the South Pole, which we know nowadays isn't possible, but they didn't know that then. So yeah. And I have lotion on my hand that I was about to put on before the synopsis. So I'm going to hand it over to Dad.
Okay, so I have an announcement to make, first of all. Okay, Mom says JJ PJs. Mom says Daniel PJs. Okay, so I know the other day I said we were going to read Twice Freed. We cannot find Twice Freed. So I think it's either in Kimmy's room or Daniel's room, or it's missing. It's MIA. We are looking for it. We hope that we can find it. But if we don't find it, I do have a backup plan, because I've recently listened to this book and I absolutely love it. I listened to the audiobook, and I definitely want to read it. Daniel has listened to a little of the audiobook, but not all of it. So some of it will be kind of a review for him. But I'm seriously considering this book if we cannot find Twice Freed. This is not a Bible parallel like Twice Freed is, but that's okay. So it's called Mara. If you can't see the screen, it's called Mara, Daughter of the Nile by Eloise Jarvis McGraw. So that is my announcement. And JJ is in PJs. Yay! Daniel, are you in PJs? Daniel, are you in PJs? Okay, JJ, now you have to get in your room. All right. Here we go. 20,000 leagues under the sea. This is chapter 14, the South Pole, which is covered with ice in this story. I rushed onto the platform. Yes, the open sea. Mom says, good job, JJ. With but a few scattered pieces of ice and moving icebergs, a long stretch of sea, a world of birds in the air, and myriads of fishes under those waters, which varied from intense blue to olive green according to the bottom. The thermometer marked 3 degrees centigrade above zero. It was comparatively spring, shut up as we were behind this iceberg, whose lengthened mass was dimly seen on our northern horizon. Mom says, now get snuggled in bed. Both of you, because Daniel should be in his PJs also, and I'm getting a little frustrated because you're not following instructions. Daniel, 5, 4. All right. Are we at the pole? I asked the captain with a beating heart. I do not know, he replied. At noon I will take our bearings. But will the sun show itself through this fog? Said I, looking at the leaden sky. However little it shows, it will be enough, replied the captain. About 10 minutes south, a solitary island rose to a height of 104 yards. We made for it, but carefully, for the sea might be strewn with banks. 1 hour afterward, we had reached it. 2 hours later, we had made the round of it. It measured 4 or 5 miles in circumference. A narrow canal separated it from a considerable stretch of land, perhaps a continent, for we could not see its limits. The existence of this land seemed to give some color to Maury's theory. The ingenious American has remarked that between the South Pole and the 60th parallel, the sea is covered with floating ice of enormous size, which is never met with in the North Atlantic. From this fact, he has drawn his conclusion that the Antarctic Circle encloses considerable continents, as icebergs cannot form in open sea, but only on the coasts. According to these calculations, the mass of ice surrounding the southern pole forms a vast cap, the circumference of which must be at least 2,500 miles. But the Nautilus, for fear of running aground, has stopped about 3 cable lengths from a strand over which reared a superb heap of rocks. The boat was launched. The captain, 2 of his men bearing instruments, Consul and myself were in it. It was 10 in the morning. I had not seen Ned Land. Doubtless, the Canadian did not wish to admit the presence of the South Pole. A few strokes of his oar brought us to the sand where we ran ashore. Consul was going to jump onto the land when I held him back. Sir, said I to Captain Nemo, to you belongs the honor of first setting foot on this land. Yes, sir, said the captain, and if I do not hesitate to tread this South Pole, it is because up to this time no human being has left a trace there. Saying this, he jumped lightly onto the sand. His heart beat with emotion. He climbed a rock sloping to a little promontory, and there, with his arms crossed, mute and motionless, and with an eager look, he seemed to take possession of these southern regions. After 5 minutes passed in this ecstasy, he turned to us. When you like, sir. I landed, followed by Consul, leaving the 2 men in the boat. For a long way, the soil was composed of a reddish, sandy stone, something like crushed brick, scoria, streams of lava, and pumice stones. One could not mistake its volcanic origin. In some parts, slight curls of smoke emitted a sulphurous smell, proving that the internal fires had lost nothing of their expansive powers, though, having climbed a high acclivity, I could see no volcano for a radius of several miles. We know that in those Antarctic countries, James Ross found 2 craters, the Erebus and Terror, in full activity on the 167th meridian, latitude 77 degrees 32 minutes. The vegetation of this desolate continent seemed to me much restricted. Some lichens lay upon the black rocks, some microscopic plants, rudimentary diatomas, a kind of cells placed between two quartz shells, long purple and scarlet weed, supported on little swimming bladders which the breaking of the waves brought to the shore. These constituted the meager flora of this region. The shore was strewn with mollusks, little mussels, and limpets. I also saw myriads of northern Cleos, 1¼ inches long, of which a whale would swallow a whole world at a mouthful, and some perfect sea butterflies animating the waters on the skirts of the shore. There appeared on the high bottoms some coral shrubs of the kind which, according to James Ross, lived in the Antarctic seas to the depth of more than 1,000 yards. Then there were little kingfishers and starfish studding the soil, but where life abounded most was in the air. There thousands of birds fluttered and flew of all kinds, deafening us with their cries. Others crowded the rock, looking at us as we passed by without fear and pressing familiarly close by our feet. There were penguins, so agile in the water, heavy and awkward as they are on the ground. They were uttering harsh cries, a large assembly, sober in gesture but extravagant in clamor. Albatrosses passed in the air, the expanse of their wings being at least 4 yards and a half, and justly called the vultures of the ocean. Some gigantic petrels and some dimiers, a kind of a small duck, the underpart of whose body is black and white. Then there were a whole series of petrels, some whitish and brown bordered wings, others blue, peculiar to the Antarctic seas, and so oily, as I told Consul, that the inhabitants of the Faroe Islands had nothing to do before lighting them but to put a wick in. A little more, said Consul, and they would be perfect lamps. After that, we cannot expect nature to have previously furnished them with wicks. About half a mile farther on, the soil was riddled with ruff's nests, a sort of laying ground out of which many birds were issuing. Captain Nemo had some hundreds hunted. They uttered a cry like the braying of a donkey, were about the size of a goose, slate color on the body, white beneath with a yellow line round their throats. They allowed themselves to be killed with a stone, never trying to escape, but the fog did not lift, and at 11 the sun had not yet shown itself. Its absence made me uneasy. Without it, no observations were possible. How then could we decide whether we had reached the pole? When I rejoined Captain Nemo, I found him leaning on a piece of rock, silently watching the sky. He seemed impatient and vexed. But what was to be done? This rash and powerful man could not command the sun as he did the sea. Noon arrived without the orb of day showing itself for an instant. We could not even tell its position behind the curtain of fog, and soon the fog turned to snow. Till tomorrow, said the captain quietly, and we returned to the Nautilus and these atmospheric disturbances. The tempest of snow continued till the next day. It was impossible to remain on the platform. From the salon, where I was taking notes of incidents happening during the excursion to the polar continent, I could hear the cries of petrels and albatrosses sporting in the midst of this violent storm. The Nautilus did not remain motionless, but skirted the coast, advancing 10 miles more to the south in the half-light left by the sun as it skirted the edge of the horizon. The next day, the 20th of March, the snow had ceased. The cold was a little greater, and the thermometer showing 2 degrees below zero. The fog was rising, and I hoped that that day our observations might be taken. Captain Nemo not having yet appeared, the boat took Consul and myself to land. The soil was still of the same volcanic nature. Everywhere were traces of lava, scoria, and basalt, but the crater which had vomited them I could not see. Here, as lower down, this continent was alive with myriads of birds, but their rule was now divided with large troops of sea mammals, looking at us with their soft eyes. There were several kinds of seals, some stretched on the earth, some on flakes of ice, many going in and out of the sea. They did not flee at our approach, never having had anything to do with man, and I reckoned that there were provisions there for hundreds of vessels. Sir, said Consul, will you tell me the names of these creatures? They are seals and morses. It was now 8 in the morning. 4 hours remained to us before the sun could be observed with advantage. I directed our steps toward a vast bay cut in the steep granite shore. There I can aver that earth and ice were lost to sight by the numbers of sea mammals covering them, and I involuntarily sought for old Proteus, the mythological shepherd, who watched these immense flocks of Neptune. There were more seals than anything else, forming distinct groups, male and female, the father watching over his family, the mother suckling her little ones, some already strong enough to go a few steps. When they wished to change their place, they took little jumps made by the contraction of their bodies and helped awkwardly enough by the imperfect fin, which, as with the lamantine, their cousins, formed a perfect forearm. I should say that in the water, which is their element, the spine of these creatures is flexible. With smooth and close skin and webbed feet, they swim admirably. In resting on the earth, they take the most graceful attitudes. Thus the ancients, observing their soft and expressive looks, which cannot be surpassed by the most beautiful look a woman can give, their clear, voluptuous eyes, their charming positions, and the poetry of their manners, metamorphosed them, the male into a Triton and the female into a mermaid. I made Consul notice the considerable development of the lobes of the brain in these interesting cetaceans. No mammal except man has such a quantity of brain matter. They are also capable of receiving a certain amount of education, are easily domesticated, and I think with other naturalists that if properly taught, they would be of a great service as fishing dogs. The greater part of them slept on the rocks or on the sand. Amongst these seals, properly so called, which have no external ears, in which they differ from the otter, whose ears are prominent, I noticed several varieties of seals about 3 yards long, with a white coat, bulldog heads, armed with teeth in both jaws, 4 incisors at the top and 4 at the bottom, and 2 large canine teeth in the shape of a fleur-de-lis. Amongst them glided sea elephants, a kind of seal with short, flexible trunks. The giants of this species measured 20 feet and 10 yards and a half in length, but they did not move as we approached. These creatures are not dangerous? Asked Consul. No, not unless you attack them. When they have to defend their young, their rage is terrible. It is not uncommon for them to break the fishing boats to pieces. They are quite right, said Consul. I do not say they are not. 2 miles farther on, we were stopped by the promontory which shelters the bay from the southerly winds. Beyond it, we heard loud bellowings, such as a troop of ruminants would produce. Good, said Consul. A concert of bulls. No, a concert of morses. They are fighting. They are either fighting or playing. We now began to climb the blackish rocks amid unforeseen stumbles, and over stones which the ice made slippery. More than once I rolled over at the expense of my loins. Consul, more prudent or more steady, did not stumble, and helped me up, saying, If, sir, you would have the kindness to take wider steps, you would preserve your equilibrium better. Arrived at the upper ridge of the promontory, I saw a vast white plain covered with morses. They were playing amongst themselves, and what we heard were bellowings of pleasure, not of anger. As I passed these curious animals, I could examine them leisurely, for they did not move. Their skins were thick and rugged, of a yellowish tint, approaching to red. Their hair was short and scant. Some of them were 4 yards and a quarter long. Quieter and less timid than their cousins of the north, they did not, like them, place sentinels round the outskirts of their encampment. After examining this city of morses, I began to think of returning. It was 11 o'clock, and if Captain Nemo found the conditions favorable for observations, I wished to be present at the operation. We followed a narrow pathway running along the summit of the steep shore. At 11:30, we had reached the place where we landed. The boat had run aground, bringing the captain. I saw him standing on a block of basalt, his instruments near him, his eyes fixed on the northern horizon, near which the sun was then describing a lengthened curve. I took my place beside him and waited without speaking. Noon arrived, and, as before, the sun did not appear. It was a fatality. Observations were still wanting. If not accomplished tomorrow, we must give up all idea of taking away. We were indeed exactly at the 20th of March. Tomorrow, the 21st, would be the equinox. The sun would disappear behind the horizon for 6 months, and with its disappearance, the long polar night would begin. Since the September equinox, it had emerged from the northern horizon, rising by lengthened spirals up to the 21st of December. At this period, the summer solstice of the northern regions, it had begun to descend, and tomorrow was to shed its last rays upon them. I communicated my fears and observations to Captain Nemo. "You are right, Monsieur Aronnax," said he. "If tomorrow I cannot take the altitude of the sun, I shall not be able to do it for 6 months. But precisely because chance has led me into these seas on the 21st of March, my bearings will be easy to take. If at 12 we can see the sun." "Why, Captain?" "Because then the orb of day describes such lengthened curves that it is difficult to measure exactly its height above the horizon, and grave errors may be made with instruments." "What will you do then?" "I shall only use my chronometer," replied Captain Nemo. "If tomorrow, the 21st of March, the disk of the sun, allowing for refraction, is exactly cut by the northern horizon, it will show that I am at the South Pole." "Just so," said I, "but this statement is not mathematically correct, because the equinox does not necessarily begin at noon." "Very likely, sir, but the error will not be 100 yards, and we do not want more. Till tomorrow, then." Captain Nemo returned on board. Conseil and I remained to survey the shore, observing and studying until 5 o'clock. Then I went to bed, not, however, without invoking, like the Indian, the favor of the radiant orb. The next day, the 21st of March, at 5 in the morning, I mounted the platform. I found Captain Nemo there. "The weather is lightening a little, said he. "I have some hope. After breakfast, we will go on shore and choose a post for observation." That point settled, I sought Ned Land. I wanted to take him with me, but the obstinate Canadian refused, and I saw that his taciturnity and his bad humor grew day by day. After all, I was not sorry for his obstinacy under the circumstances. Indeed, there were too many seals on shore, and we ought not to lay such temptation in this unreflecting fisherman's way. Breakfast over, we went on shore. The Nautilus had gone some miles further up in the night. It was a whole league from the coast, above which reared a sharp peak about 500 yards high. The boat took with me Captain Nemo, 2 men of the crew, and the instruments, which consisted of a chronometer, a telescope, and a barometer. While crossing, I saw numerous whales belonging to the 3 kinds peculiar to the southern seas: the whale, or the English right whale, which has no dorsal fin; the humpback, which with reeved chest and large whitish fins, which, in spite of its name, do not form wings; and the finback of a yellowish brown, the liveliest of all the cetacea. This powerful creature is heard a long way off when he throws to a great height columns of air and vapor, which look like whirlwinds of smoke. These different mammals were disporting themselves in troops on the quiet waters, and I could see that this basin of the Antarctic pole serves as a place of refuge to the cetacea too closely tracked by the hunters. I also noticed large medusae floating between the reeds. At 9 we landed. The sky was brightening, the clouds were flying to the south, and the fog seemed to be leaving the cold surface of the waters. Captain Nemo went toward the peak. which he doubtless meant to be his observatory. It was a painful ascent over the sharp lava and the pumice stones in an atmosphere often impregnated with sulphurous smell from the smoking cracks. For a man unaccustomed to walk on land, the captain climbed the steep slopes with an agility I never saw equaled, and which a hunter would have envied. We were 2 hours getting to the summit of this peak, which was half porphyry and half basalt. From thence we looked upon a vast sea which toward the north distinctly traced its boundary line upon the sky. At our feet lay fields of dazzling whiteness, over our heads a pale azure free from fog. To the north the disk of the sun seemed like a ball of fire already horned by the cutting of the horizon. From the bosom of the water rose sheaves of liquid jets by hundreds. In the distance lay the Nautilus like a cetacean asleep on the water. Behind us, to the south and east, an immense country and a chaotic heap of rocks and ice, the limits of which were not visible. On arriving at the summit, Captain Nemo carefully took the mean height of the barometer, for he would have to consider that in taking his observations. At 11:45, the sun, then seen only by refraction, looked like a golden disk shedding its last rays upon this deserted continent and seas which never man had yet plowed. Captain Nemo, furnished with a lenticular glass, which is lenticular, I think that's kind of a compass. Lenticular glass. Okay, anyway, which by means of a mirror corrected the refraction, watched the orb. No, I'm sorry, that's like a telescope kind of thing. The orb sinking below the horizon by degrees followed a lengthened diagonal. I think it's like a surveyor's thing, a lenticular glass. They have that little telescopy thing that they have in their instruments. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I held the chronometer. My heart beat fast. If the disappearance of the half disk of the sun coincided with 12 o'clock on the chronometer, we were at the pole itself. 12, I exclaimed. The South Pole, replied Captain Nemo in a grave voice, handing me the glass which showed the orb cut in exactly equal parts by the horizon. I looked at the last rays crowning the peak and the shadows mounting by degrees up its slopes. At that moment, Captain Nemo, resting with his hand on my shoulder, said, I, Captain Nemo, on this 21st day of March, 1868, have reached the South Pole on the 90th degree, and I take possession of this part of the globe equal to 1/6 of the known continents. In whose name, Captain? In my own, sir. Saying which, Captain Nemo unfurled a black banner bearing an N in gold quartered on its bunting. Then, turning toward the orb of day, whose last rays lapped the horizon on the sea, he exclaimed, Adieu, sun, disappear, thou radiant orb, rest beneath this open sea, and let a night of 6 months spread its shadows over my new domain. All right, I have a couple of comments to make, and the first one is that I was thinking of how coincidental it would be if it was the equinox, which it did turn out to be the equinox. The second one that I have to say, that if you are exactly at the South or the North Pole, actually either one, then would you not then by definition be at all of the meridian lines at once, every line of longitude you would be at once, and so therefore there would be no time, because time is defined by the lines of longitude. Put your comments in the comments to let me know what you think about my little idea there, because they kept saying 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, noon. But in actuality, if it was actually the 90th degree of latitude, then they are inhabiting all lines of longitude at once. So there's no time. So anyway, that's just my little philosophical thought for that particular chapter. Now we're going to go on to chapter 15, accident or incident. Kimmy, you awake? JJ, you awake? Daniel, you awake? Daniel, you awake? Faking. Okay, Daniel was faking. All right, here we go. Chapter 15, accident or incident. The next day, the 22nd of March, at 6 in the morning, preparations for departure were begun. No, I'm not. Okay, Mom says, but time still passes in space. I'm not saying that time doesn't exist, but I'm saying that a measurement of time doesn't exist. So maybe I wasn't clear when I said that. There's no way to measure time if you're inhabiting every longitudinal coordinate at the 90th parallel. So yes. I can't hear you, Kimmy. They could be going off of their own time. However, their internal body clocks. I agree with you there. Okay, so Daniel needs to get back in his room. Get your blanket and get back in your room. Quickly. Well, don't do that. All right, this pause brought to you by Daniel's Blanket, also known as, I don't know what it's also known as. Daniel, we need to get going. Come on. We're wasting time. Daniel. Okay, Daniel, careful on the cord. Okay, here we are, chapter 15, accident or incident. All right, boys, y'all need to get in your beds, okay? Hello? Yes, sir, Daniel? Yes, sir. All right. The next day, the 22nd of March at 6 in the morning, preparations for departure were begun. The last gleams of twilight were melting into the night. Melting! The cold, okay, I'm sorry. The cold was great. The constellations shone with wonderful intensity. In the zenith glittered that wondrous Southern Cross, the polar bear of Antarctic regions. The thermometer showed 120 degrees below zero, and when the wind freshened, it was most biting. Flakes of ice increased on the open water. The sea seemed everywhere alike. Numerous blackish patches spread on the surface, showing the formation of fresh ice. Evidently, the southern basin, frozen during the 6 winter months, was absolutely inaccessible. What became of the whales in that time? Doubtless they went beneath the iceberg, seeking more practicable seas. As to the seals and morses, accustomed to live in a hard climate, they remained on these icy shores. These creatures have the instinct to break holes in the ice field and to keep them open. To these holes they come for breath. When the birds driven away by the cold have emigrated to the north, these sea mammals remain sole masters of the polar continent. But the reservoirs were filling with water, and the Nautilus was slowly descending. At 1,000 feet deep, it stopped. Its screw beat the waves, and it advanced straight toward the north at a speed of 15 miles an hour. Towards night, it was already floating under the immense body of the iceberg. At 3 in the morning, I was awakened by a violent shock. I sat up in my bed and listened to the darkness when I was thrown in the middle of the room. The Nautilus, after having struck, had rebounded violently. I groped along the partition and by the staircase to the salon, which was lit by the luminous ceiling. The furniture was upset. Fortunately, the windows were firmly set and had held fast. The pictures on the starboard side, from being no longer vertical, were clinging to the paper, whilst those of the port side were hanging at least a foot from the wall. The Nautilus was lying on its starboard side, perfectly motionless. I heard footsteps and a confusion of voices, but Captain Nemo did not appear. As I was leaving the salon, Ned Land and Conseil entered. "What is the matter?" said I at once. "I came to ask you, sir," replied Conseil. "Confound it!" exclaimed the Canadian. "I know well enough. The Nautilus has struck, and, judging by the way she lies, I do not think she will right herself as she did the first time in the Torres Straits." "But," I asked, "has she at least come to the surface of the sea?" "We do not know," said Conseil. "It is easy to decide," I answered. I consulted the manometer. To my great surprise, it showed a depth of more than 180 fathoms. "What does that mean?" I exclaimed. "We must ask Captain Nemo," said Conseil. "But where shall we find him?" said Ned Land. "Follow me," said I to my companions. We left the salon. There was no one in the library. At the center staircase, by the berths of the ship's crew, there was no one. I thought that Captain Nemo must be in the pilot's cage. It was best to wait. We all returned to the salon. For 20 minutes we remained thus, trying to hear the slightest noise which might be made on board the Nautilus, when Captain Nemo entered. He seemed not to see us. His face, generally so impassive, showed signs of uneasiness. He watched the compass slightly, then the manometer, and going to the planisphere, placed his finger on a spot representing the southern seas. I would not interrupt him, but some minutes later, when he turned towards me, I said, using one of his own expressions in the Torres Straits, "An incident, Captain?" "No, sir, an accident this time." "Serious?" "Perhaps." "Is the danger immediate?" "No." "The Nautilus has stranded?" "Yes." "And this has happened how?" "From a caprice of nature, not from the ignorance of man. Not a mistake that has been made in the working, but we cannot prevent equilibrium from producing its effects. We may brave human laws, but we cannot resist natural ones." Captain Nemo had chosen a strange moment for uttering this philosophical reflection. On the whole, his answer helped me little. "May I ask, sir, the cause of this accident?" "An enormous block of ice, a whole mountain, has turned over," he replied. "When icebergs are undermined at the base by warmer water or reiterated shocks, their center of gravity rises, and the whole thing turns over. This is what has happened. One of these blocks, as it fell, struck the Nautilus, then, gliding under its hull, raised it with irresistible force, bringing it into beds which are not so thick, where it is lying on its side. But can we not get the Nautilus off by emptying its reservoirs, that it might regain its equilibrium?" "That, sir, is being done at this moment. You can hear the pump working. Look at the needle of the manometer. It shows that the Nautilus is rising, but the block of ice is floating with it, and until some obstacle stops its ascending motion, our position cannot be altered." Indeed, the Nautilus still held the same position to starboard. Doubtless it would right itself when the block stopped, but at this moment who knows if we may not be frightfully crushed between the two glassy surfaces. I reflected on all the consequences of our position. Captain Nemo never took his eyes off the manometer. Since the fall of the iceberg, the Nautilus had risen about 150 feet, but it still made the same angle with the perpendicular. Suddenly, a slight movement was felt in the hold. Evidently, it was righting a little. Things hanging in the salon were sensibly returning to their normal position. The partitions were nearing the upright. No one spoke. With beating hearts, we watched and felt the straightening. The boards became horizontal under our feet. 10 minutes passed. "At last we have righted," I exclaimed. "Yes," said Captain Nemo, going to the door of the salon. "But are we floating?" I asked. "Certainly," he replied, "since the reservoirs are not empty, and when empty the Nautilus must rise to the surface of the sea." We were in open sea, but at a distance of about 10 yards on either side of the Nautilus rose a dazzling wall of ice. Above and beneath the same wall, above because the lower surface of the iceberg stretched over us like an immense ceiling, beneath because the overturned block, having slid by degrees, had found a resting place on the lateral walls which kept it in that position. The Nautilus was really imprisoned in a perfect tunnel of ice more than 20 yards in breadth, filled with quiet water. It was easy to get out of it by either going forward or backward and then make a free passage under the iceberg, some hundreds of yards deeper. The luminous ceiling had been extinguished, but the salon was still resplendent with intense light. It was the powerful reflection from the glass partition sent violently back to the sheets of the lantern. I cannot describe the effect of the voltaic rays upon the great block so capriciously cut. Upon every angle, every ridge, every facet was thrown a different light, according to the nature of the veins running through the ice. A dazzling mine of gems, particularly of sapphires, their blue rays crossing with the green emerald. Here and there were opal shades of wonderful softness, running through the bright spots like diamonds of fire, the brilliancy of which the eye could not bear. The power of the lantern seemed increased 100-fold, like a lamp through the lenticular plates of a first-class lighthouse. How beautiful, cried Council. Yes, I said, it is a wonderful sight, is it not, Ned? Yes, confound it, yes, answered Ned Land. It is superb. I am mad at being obliged to admit it. No one has ever seen anything like it, but the sight may cost us dearly. And, if I must say all, I think we are seeing here things which God never intended man to see. Ned was right. It was too beautiful. Suddenly a cry from Consul made me turn. What is it? I asked. Shut your eyes, sir. Do not look, sir. Saying which, Consul clapped his hands over his eyes. But what is the matter, my boy? I am dazzled, blinded. My eyes turned involuntarily toward the glass, but I could not stand the fire which seemed to devour them. I understood what had happened. The Nautilus had put on full speed. All the quiet luster of the ice walls that was at once changed into flashes of lightning. The fire from these myriads of diamonds was blinding. It required some time to calm our troubled looks. At last the hands were taken down. Faith, I should never have believed it, said Consul. It was then 5 in the morning, and at that moment a shock was felt at the bows of the Nautilus. I knew that its spur had struck a block of ice. It must have been a false maneuver, for this submarine tunnel, obstructed by blocks, was not very easy navigation. I thought that Captain Nemo, by changing his course, would either turn these obstacles or else follow the windings of the tunnel. In any case, the road before us could not be entirely blocked, but, contrary to my expectations, the Nautilus took a decided retrograde motion. We are going backwards, said Consul. Yes, I replied. The end of this tunnel can have no egress. And then? Then, said I, the working is easy. We must go back again and go out at the southern opening, that is all. In speaking thus, I wished to appear more confident than I really was, but the retrograde motion of the Nautilus was increasing, and reversing the screw, it carried us at great speed. It will be a hindrance, said Ned. What does it matter? Some hours, more or less, provided we get out at last. Yes, repeated Ned Land, provided we do get out at last. For a short time I walked from the salon to the library. My companions were silent. I soon threw myself on an ottoman and took a book which my eyes overran mechanically. A quarter of an hour after, Consul, approaching me, said, "Is what you are reading very interesting, sir?" "Very interesting," I replied. "I should think so, sir. Is it your own book you are reading?" "My book?" And indeed I was holding in my hand the work on the great submarine depths. I did not even dream of it. I closed the book and returned it to my walk. Ned and Consul rose to go. "Stay here, my friends," I said, detaining them. "Let us remain together until we are out of this block." "As you please, sir," Consul replied. Some hours passed. I often looked at the instruments hanging from the partition. The manometer showed that the Nautilus kept at a constant depth of more than 300 yards. The compass still pointed to the south. The log indicated a speed of 20 miles an hour, which, in such a cramped space, was very great. But Captain Nemo knew that he could not hasten too much, and that minutes were worth ages to us. At 25 minutes past 8, a second shock took place, this time from behind. I turned pale. My companions were close by my side. I seized Consul's hand. Our looks expressed our feelings better than words. At this moment, the captain entered the salon. I went up to him. Our course is barred southward? I asked. Yes, sir. The iceberg has shifted and closed every outlet. We are blocked up then? Yes. Chapter 16 is called Want of Air, and I think we need to read that one tomorrow. And yeah, but we're already at 50 minutes and it's going to be close to an hour and 10, and that's just on the long side of where I want to be on these. So we have 75 pages to go in this book. So I am looking forward to and they do go really fast, just so you know, because it's like typed double spaced. It's like reading it from a word processor kind of. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Mom says, good night, my lives, loves. It's whatever. She didn't really say that. Okay, we are very excited that we got to sing happy birthday to Rebecca 3 times, and actually 4 times, because we sang it once on her voicemail, and then she called us back right when we were finished, and so we sang it again on her live telephone call, and then we sang it once at the beginning of this live stream, and then we sang it again after somebody logged on, but it was actually Mom. So that was 4 times that we sang to her, and I think she only heard it once. So I hope that you get to hear all the other times, because they're all recorded, that we sing happy birthday to you, Rebecca. Rebecca says, good night, kiddos. We love you, Rebecca. We hope you have a happy, super happy birthday. And Kimmy said wait. So we are waiting with anticipation as she walks down the stairs. And I have no idea what she's going to do. I'm in anticipation too. I am just beside myself, not knowing what is going to happen next. Daniel thinks he knows. Oh, he says he thinks he might know. I think it's only 6 chapters though, so we'll probably get it done in either 2 or probably 3 days, is my guess. Oh, here's a card.
Hey, I'm sorry I can't give this to you, but we did not have an envelope. But I drew this for you, and you can't really see it. It says, hope you have a great day, and it has everybody signing who signed it.
She can probably see that. No, that's not the reason why, Daniel.
Well,
okay, Daniel's saying some inappropriate things, so I'm going to go now. And I hope that you guys are having a great night, and we will see you tomorrow. Adieu.